Match day has come and gone, and I can finally say that my first externship application season is over. Well, technically it was over a while ago, but I didn't want to say anything because I wanted to wait until after match day when I knew that most of my cohort members, if not all of them, will have matched somewhere, but I can finally talk about it now. So basically what this video is going to be is just like a recount of what my externship application process kind of looked like from start to finish for me, and then also what the externship application process kind of looks like as a whole for everybody, or at least like what it looks like for folks who are in programs in the New York and New Jersey area. I think Connecticut's also included. Don't quote me on that, but I think so. But yeah, I'm really trying to not make this video too long. So I'm just gonna jump right in. Hey, hello, my name is JoJo and welcome back to my channel. Or if you're new here, welcome. Okay, so in clinical psych doctoral programs, every student, if they intend on graduating and applying for licensure, is required to complete a certain number of externships and one internship. And your internship is like your last year of your program. So every year leading up to that, you are expected to be in an externship site of some sort. And when exactly you start applying for externships will depend on your program. In my program, every second year student is kind of guaranteed an internal externship at our in-house counseling center. So we didn't necessarily have to apply to external externships if we didn't want to. We could have. I chose not to because in my program, the second year students who work at the in-house counseling center are paid and externships are typically not paid. So money. But there is the option to apply to external externships for our second year if we wanted to. But in other programs, you might be expected to start applying to external externships in your first year of the program. So you'll probably start at an in-house clinic of some kind in your program, but in the fall of your first year, you will probably begin working on your externship applications for your second year externships. So coming into the second year of my program, I knew that I was gonna have to start this process. So generally externship applications are due in January of whatever year you intend on starting the externship. So like I will be starting my externship in the fall of 2023, which means applications were due in January of 2023. But I was a little shocked by how little information we got all the way up until like November. Sometime in November, I can't remember exactly when, but it was sometime in November where we finally had like our externship information session, right? It was in that meeting where they just kind of threw everything at us that we needed to know and then expected us to just take it from there. And that was very stressful because it was so much information thrown at us at once, but also like not information that was necessarily helpful for the actual application process. It was a lot of explaining what was going to happen once applications were submitted and very little of how to begin working on applications. So needless to say, after that information session, it was a lot of like going around and asking more senior students what their experiences were like, asking them for examples of like cover letters and things like that, which like examples of like CVs and cover letters and all of that were provided to us in the information session, but they were very generic examples that come from, I think, like the APIC internship application handbook. And APIC is the program that is used for internship. There's a separate program that is used for externship applications, but all of the examples of CVs and cover letters that we were provided that we could use as templates came from that. So they were very generic, very like very basic and not helpful in like helping us craft our own cover letters. The CVs, you know, CVs are CVs, but with the cover letters specifically, we were very nervous about how to write those and how to write them well because we had been told that the cover letters are essentially all that the externship directors really look at when it comes to your application, which is very like anxiety provoking, because generally when you're submitting externship applications, you're submitting a bunch of materials, right? You're submitting your cover letter, you're submitting your CV. Sometimes the site asked for a copy of my transcript. Some sites asked for a case summary, other sites asked for a testing report. And so they're asking for all of those materials, but then we're being told the only thing they actually like genuinely look at is your cover letter. I don't know how true that is, but that's what we were told. And so we were really stressed out about the cover letters. But yeah, so the information session happened in November, and a lot of us left that information session still feeling like we had no clue what to do or how to begin. So after that, essentially everyone was kind of just like reaching out to people who had already been through the process, and also reaching out to like supervisors who may have been involved in externship application processes at other institutions. And so that's how we got a lot of the information we needed on how to maneuver the process. So like I mentioned in my January, February update video, I'm losing track of my months. I cannot believe it's already March. So like I mentioned in my January, February update video, after being sick for part of winter break, essentially spent the latter half of break cranking out my application. Up until that point, I had not worked on a single thing. So basically from like the week of New Year's until whenever applications were due, I believe they were due on like January 10th, I think. Let me double check that. Okay, correction. You could have started submitting applications on January 9th, but the deadline to finish submitting applications was January 16th. Starting on January 9th, you had an entire week to submit externship applications. So basically from like New Year's, the week of New Year's, until I think I submitted all of my applications on like January 12th or something, maybe 13th. I was doing nothing but working on my cover letters. I had already previously started updating my CV. I already had a full testing report that had been approved and signed by my supervisor in the fall semester. And then I had also already had a case summary written up that my professor had read through and given me feedback on. So essentially all that was left for me to do in those few weeks was work on my cover letters. And for some reason that was really hard for me. Cover letters are the most annoying things to write. I don't understand why they're required. I feel like they're so pointless. I hate cover letters with a passion. So yes, it took me the entire 2 weeks to write my cover letters. So the kind of like overarching organization that oversees the externship application process for the region of the country that I'm in is called Ninja PDOT. So that is the website that we had to use to find externships and apply to externships. Everything had to be done through that website, with a couple of exceptions that I will get into in a second. And so I think in one of my vlogs, I think it was my Thursday vlog from last semester, I had talked a little bit about me having to look for externships to apply to, because there was like some internal process within my program where they wanted to know where we intended to apply, just so that they could guide us in the right direction if they felt like we weren't fully competitive for a certain site or whatever. I get really annoyed with the internal processes in my program. Anyway, so in that vlog, I think I had mentioned that I had kind of narrowed down my options to 6 sites that I would apply for. We could apply in the second year of the program, we can apply to up to 10, I believe, or maybe 8. And I had kind of more or less settled on 6 sites that I would apply for. That very quickly dropped down to 4. So out of the 6 sites that I had originally kind of settled on, 3 of them were hospitals. 1 was a VA, which is technically a hospital, and then 2 of them were like community clinics. And the longer I thought about it, the more I realized that I don't really want to be at a hospital next year. I've heard that externships at hospitals are really stressful, they're really time consuming, the students are often overworked and under supervised, and I just didn't want to go through that. So I quickly dropped 2 of the hospitals from my list. The one hospital that I left on my list, I left on there because it was a strictly like assessment only site. And I've mentioned a little bit that I'm kind of getting into assessment and I want to find a way to incorporate it into my work. So I had left that hospital on there because I was very interested in getting more assessment experience. And then I also left the VA on there because I'm very into trauma work. And I thought that, you know, working at a PTSD clinic in a VA would be good. And then I still applied to the 2 community clinics that I originally decided on. So the exception that I alluded to a second ago, even though the overarching organization for externships is Ninja, not all externships are required to use the Ninja process to like bring in externs. I'm trying to find the best way to explain this without it sounding really confusing. So there are some sites who are willing to accept externs, but don't want to go through the Ninja website in order to do so, because when they go through the Ninja website, they are required to follow a very strict process with a lot of rules and a lot of like deadlines and time limits that they probably either like just don't want to put up with, or it just doesn't work for them. And so in those cases, the externship site directors will either send out information to programs to disseminate to students, or you will have to reach out to the site directly to get information about the externship and how to apply and what materials to submit and when and all of that. So one of the community externships that I applied for was for a site that was not using the Ninja process. Based on things that I had heard, both from externs who had previously been at this site and just more generally from talking to clinicians who are familiar with the site, I had decided that this site was my top choice. Like out of the 4 sites that I applied to, this was the site that I was like, I want to be here. Going through the externships on the Ninja website and just reading through them and trying to get a feel for what they might be like, I very much felt like I didn't necessarily fit anywhere in terms of like where my interests lie. And so the other 3 sites that I had chosen, with the exception of the assessment site, which was my second choice, I just felt like I picked them because they fit with some aspect of what I'm interested in working on. But neither of those sites felt like necessarily like a good fit for me. It was kind of just like I need to apply to more than 2 sites kind of thing, you know? So with this non-Ninja externship site, I had decided that was my top choice for a multitude of reasons, but it was my top choice. And so like I said, I submitted all 4 of my applications on the same day. I believe it was like January 12th or 13th. The 3 that were on the Ninja website, I uploaded my materials there for each site individually. And for the one that wasn't using Ninja, I just sent over my materials directly to the director. Funny thing is, for one of the Ninja sites, in addition to uploading application materials to the website itself, they had asked specifically in their listing that students also send their application to the directors via email. And so I did that. And that actually turned out to be a saving grace for me, because apparently when I uploaded my application materials for that site, particularly on the website, some glitch happened and my materials didn't upload correctly and I couldn't go back and re-upload them. Like the website wouldn't let me re-upload my materials. And when I had emailed her my materials, for some reason there was also something wrong with the file. So she reached out to me from that email to let me know that my materials were not uploaded correctly. And asked me to try again, and I did, and it still wasn't working. When I opened the files on my end, even I opened it on like my laptop and on my phone and all of that, and it was opening just fine. But for some reason on her end, the file was not opening properly. So ultimately what she ended up doing was asking me to just send each file individually, as opposed to compiling them into one PDF and sending it to her that way, because that was the requirement. All of the materials had to be uploaded into one PDF file and then sent off on the website. So thankfully she was kind enough to reach out to me and just say, send me all of your files individually, just name them for what they are, and I'll, look at your application that way. And so I did that. Now, that had me panicking because I immediately started wondering if that happened for the other 2 sites. And I had no way of knowing if that had happened for the other 2 sites. And with the Ninja process, there is a rule that you are not allowed to reach out to externship directors prior to a certain date. And it was still before that date. So I could not reach out to them to ask them if my materials had uploaded correctly. So I just had to hope in good faith that everyone got my materials properly. With the one site that was not using Ninja, they got my materials just fine. They confirmed that they got them, and everything was fine there. So continuing on with this Ninja process, after my applications are submitted, like I said, there are a lot of rules to the Ninja process. There are a lot of rules that sites are beholden to if they are participating in the externship match through Ninja. And one of those rules is that all interview offers can only go out after a certain date, which I believe was January 23rd, I believe. Whatever that next Monday was after January 16th. All interview offers from sites who are using Ninja could only go out starting on that day. And then I think interviews could continue up until like February 24th. But for sites on Ninja, January 23rd is when they could start sending out interview offers. However, for the site that I applied to that was not using Ninja, because they're not beholden to those rules, they could send out interview offers whenever the hell they wanted to. So they were the first ones, my top choice, my top choice was the first one to send me an interview offer because they were allowed to reach out before anyone else was. So I got an interview offer for that site the Tuesday after I submitted my applications. Naturally, I accepted, but I was terrified because I didn't want my first interview to be for my top choice, because that means that I would basically be going in absolutely blind. And so this is where the interview panic started. So, like I mentioned, my program did a really, I feel like, terrible job of preparing us for this process. And part of why I feel like they did a terrible job was because when it came to interviews, no one really told us what to expect from these interviews. No one knew how long they were gonna be. No one knew what format they were gonna take. No one knew like how many rounds of interviews we would have to go through for sites. No one really told us what kinds of questions would be asked of us. And so again, we had to take matters into our own hands and start reaching out to people who we knew had some exposure to this process so that we could get a better understanding of what to expect in these interviews. And so for my first interview for the site that was my top choice, I very frantically walked into supervision that day, the day I got the interview offer and accepted the interview. I went into supervision frantic. I was like, I have an interview on Friday and I have no idea what to do. And so my supervisor talked through with me some interview questions that I might be asked, and I, workshopped my responses to those. And then that Thursday, again, I went into my other supervision with my other supervisor and did the same thing. I said, I have this interview tomorrow. I have no idea what to expect. I've started workshopping some answers, but I need more help. And so again, in that supervision, we also went through some potential questions I might get asked and workshopped my answer for those. And so in total, before this interview, I had workshopped responses and practiced responses to about 10 or 15 different questions that I thought and had been told that I could possibly be asked. And I felt more or less prepared. By the end of Thursday, the night before my interview, I felt more or less prepared. Like, I had practiced my responses quite a bit. I had like bullet points written down in my notes. Thankfully, the interview was going to be on Zoom. So I did pretty much the same thing that I did for my PhD program interviews, which was like jot down bullet points for each response in my notes app. And I plan to have my notes app pulled up next to my Zoom screen so that I could just like glance over at it to make sure I was hitting all my bullet points. So I more or less by the end of Thursday, felt fairly prepared for this interview, even though I was like still absolutely terrified because it was my very first externship interview and it was for my top choice site. The unfortunate part of that was that my interview was not scheduled until the afternoon / evening of Friday. So I had to wake up on Friday and go through the entire day just anxiety building. Like the closer the interview time got, the more anxiety I felt. I am someone who, I like my interviews. I hate interviewing in general, but if I absolutely have to interview for something, I would much prefer it be like first thing in the morning, like 9, 10, 11 a.m. is kind of pushing it, but like before noon. I would much rather my interviews be before noon because I wake up, I get ready, I don't have to think about it too much, I get out of the way and I'm done. My interview was at like 4:30 p.m. So I'm just like going through my whole day. I'm sitting in meetings and I'm just freaking out because the only thing I can think of is I have an interview in a few hours. I have an interview in 3 hours. I have an interview in 2 hours. My interview's in an hour. Holy shit, my interview's in 30 minutes. You know, it's one of those things. And so I took a quick clip of myself right before my interview started. Kind of like I was like really freaking out. I was deep breathing. And I was just like sitting at my desk, and I don't know what prompted me to take out my phone and record, but I was like, I need to record this moment, because even though I was nervous, like I said, I felt prepared for the interview. I was just really anxious. So I took out my phone to just take a quick clip of myself, kind of like I would have like a before and after, because I thought the interview was gonna go well. I really did. I thought. By the end of the interview, I was in tears. I didn't start crying during the interview, but immediately after the interview ended, I started sobbing because I felt like it had been possibly the worst interview of my entire life. And that's saying a lot, considering that like when I first started interviewing for things back in like high school, like I was bad. Like I used to be absolutely terrible at interviews. I feel like I have improved over the years. So for me to say that I felt like this was one of the worst interviews of my entire life, that means worse than like the very first interview I ever did back in high school. I thought it was bad. I can't even really begin to explain why I feel like the interview went as badly as I felt like it did. I think it was a combination of a few things. One, the demeanor of the interviewers. So I was interviewed by the two directors of the externship, who were both white men, older white men, which is a little intimidating for me as a younger Black woman. But when they started the interview, it immediately felt very awkward. And they very quickly told me like it was like they were just extremely tired because they had been interviewing a bunch of people that day. I think they told me that I was like their third or fourth interview of the afternoon, which is never good. I know no one's probably watching this who does interviews, but if you're doing an interview, please do not tell the person you're interviewing that you are tired because you've interviewed X number of people before them. Like, just don't do it because it automatically makes them feel like you're not going to care about what they have to say. And that's what I felt. I felt like, oh my God, they're exhausted. They're not gonna give a shit about anything I have to say now because their brains are probably fried. So that was the first thing. The second thing was very quickly at the beginning of the interview, I felt like they were asking me questions that I don't think anyone would have expected them to ask me. So like I said, I had prepared a list of like 10 questions that I thought I might get asked and had practiced my responses to those. The very first question they asked me happened to be similar, not verbatim, but was very similar to one of the questions on my list. So I had my answer ready to go, okay? But the immediate follow-up question to my response was something that I had not anticipated they would ask, and therefore I did not have a practiced and prepared response. Therefore, I kind of fumbled through my answer and I just started like rambling off stuff that I think would make sense, which you should never do. But anxiety, my brain wasn't working properly. I was in panic mode. So I just started rambling off whatever I thought would answer the question. 10 out of 10, do not recommend doing that. If you genuinely don't have an answer for something, it is okay to tell an interviewer that, I'm not exactly sure. I probably need some time to think about that. That's probably what I should have done. Not what I did though. I just panic answered. So from that point on, I felt like the interview just downhill, just all the way. They just kept asking me question after question after question that I was not prepared to answer. And it was because they were not asking me questions, anything related to like my clinical experience. Like I even at one point, in response to a question that they asked me, like unprovoked brought up an example of a client that I worked with. And rather than following up on the example of the client that I brought up, they like pivoted and went a completely different direction. Again, unrelated to clinical work. So I don't know why they did this. I don't know if this is like a tactic of theirs when it comes to interviewing. I don't know if they just ask off the wall questions because they know that people are going to prepare for the typical questions that they think they're going to be asked. But needless to say, I was absolutely shaking by the end of that interview. And it was quite a long interview too. It was like a full hour-long interview, which was shocking to me because I had been told that interview would probably be like 30, maybe 45 minutes max. I was in this interview for a full hour. So needless to say, I hung up that call just completely sobbing. I called my mom immediately and just started bawling on the phone to my mom about how terribly this interview went, because I just knew. I felt like I hung up that Zoom call and I knew that, all right, this was my top choice and I'm not getting it. My mom, obviously being the optimistic, supportive mother that she is, told me that I'm absolutely wrong because anytime, and this is a trend in my life, anytime I feel like I did terribly on something, it's usually the complete opposite. And I end up finding out that I did really well. So of course she told me that anytime I think I did poorly, I usually did amazing and I'm just being really hard on myself. And so I just like shut down for the rest of the night. I was not up for anything. I think I was supposed to go out with friends that night. I didn't go. I just like took a really long hot shower and lit some candles and grabbed a bottle of wine and watched Netflix for the rest of the night. Like I was really like sad girl JoJo that night, because I thought I had just ruined my chances at that externship. Because I had taken the clip before my interview, because I was gonna do like a before and after of like, the interview went great. Even though I was like sobbing at the end of the interview, I still decided to take an after clip because I knew I was gonna do this video, detailing my experience. And I thought, why the hell not show everyone the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? So I'm pretty sure I have inserted a clip of my ugly crying that I took. It's a very short clip, but just as proof that like I was actually like devastated after this interview. But thankfully the Monday after, when interview offers could start going out for the other sites that I applied for, I ended up getting 2 interview offers that week. One being the assessment only site and the other being the site for which the director emailed me and asked me to re-upload my materials. To this day, I have not heard from that other site. I haven't even gotten a rejection email. So I'm assuming that whatever glitch happened with my application for the one site also happened with that site and they just didn't bother to try to follow up with me. Am I mad? No. But yeah, I had 2 interview offers come in that week that had been scheduled for the week after. So I believe both of my interviews had been scheduled for the morning of February 3rd. I essentially scheduled them back to back because like I said, I just like to have my interviews first thing in the morning and get them done. So one I believe was gonna be at 9:30 and the other one was gonna be at 11 o'clock. Plot twist. So the week after I got those interview offers, which at that point was like a week and a half after I interviewed for my top choice, they emailed me on January 30th, the evening of January 30th. That week was the week I was supposed to have my other 2 interviews. They emailed me the night of January 30th, but I did not see the email until the morning of January 31st. And they offered me the externship. I literally screamed. I screamed. I was so shocked. Because like I said, post interview, I was sobbing. I was devastated. I was an absolute train wreck. So to get the offer before even having all of my other interviews, I was like mind blown. And that was like the perk, right, of applying to an externship that wasn't beholden to the Ninja Dot process. They could send out offers before any sites who were participating in the Ninja Dot process had the opportunity to, because sites who are using the Ninja Dot process also cannot start sending out actual like externship offers until a certain date. So they got to me before I even had to do interviews for other sites. And of course, you know, they had explained to me that because they knew that the Ninja Dot process was something that was more drawn out, I had the option to defer my acceptance and like follow through with the match process and have my other interviews and wait till match day. But because this place is my top choice, like I was like, I'm not waiting. I'm taking the offer. I'm taking the offer. So I accepted the offer that day and I withdrew from the match process. So essentially what that means is, because I had interviews scheduled for later that week, I had to email those other two sites and let them know that I had already accepted an offer and would no longer be participating in the match. So basically my externship match process was done by January 31st. However, match day is not until March 6th. So that means that I had to basically keep this to myself for an entire month, because all of my cohort members were still interviewing, were still waiting on match day. And I didn't want to in any way contribute to any anxiety that they might be feeling. So anytime my cohort members would talk about the match, I would either stay quiet, or if they asked me directly like how I was feeling, I would just be like, oh, I'm tired. Like I'm over it, or I'm ready for it to be over. Like I'm ready for it to be done. Like I was like not saying exactly like, oh, this is so stressful, you know? Like I didn't want to be that person. And so I will be at my top choice externship next year, which I am really excited for. Now that match day is come and gone, I also know which of my cohort members will be there with me. I knew other cohort members had also interviewed for that clinic. But again, because I didn't want to in any way contribute to folks' anxiety, I, in the same breath of not telling them that I had already matched somewhere, I did not ask any of the folks who I know interviewed if they had been offered a position. Just because if they didn't, I didn't want them to then turn around and be like, oh my God, did you get an offer? Oh my God, that means I didn't get it. Like, you know, just, I'm really big on just like not talking about these processes until they are finished. And when people are ready to discuss, they will discuss. But yeah, so now that I know who's gonna be there with me, I'm very, 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 very excited. And yeah. So my first externship match process is complete with a very happy ending. But since I pulled out of the match process early, I want to just very quickly run through what the rest of the process would have looked like if I had followed through with the process till match day, because like I said, there are a lot of rules involved and I want to try to give like a quick overview of what generally an externship match process looks like. So like I said, there are certain dates where things are allowed to happen. So for sites participating in the Ninja Dot match process, applications were allowed to start being submitted on January 9th or 10th. The deadline to finish submitting applications was on January 16th, I believe. Each site on Ninja Dot has their own application requirements in terms of like what materials you submit. And so you had to tailor your application, just like with anything really, you had to tailor your application, including your cover letters, to each individual site. Once the deadline for applications passed, interview offers could begin going out. I believe it was January 23rd, and interviews could continue happening all the way up until February 24th. Now, there is a period in the middle of that, I believe it's around February 8th, where there's kind of like a second round of applications that are allowed to be submitted if you aren't fully satisfied with how many interviews you have gotten thus far. So I think they said that like if by February 6th you have not had at least like 3 interviews, then they like highly encouraged folks to submit more applications starting on February 8th. And so on February 8th, the application portal reopens for any sites that want to continue accepting applications. And then it closes again. I don't know exactly when it closed because at this point I no longer cared. But at some point, the portal closed for applications again. And then, like I said, interviews could continue happening up until February 24th. And so once interviews finished on the 24th, it's a waiting process until match day, which is March 6th. On match day, there are a lot of rules to be followed that were stressed to us, because if you do not follow these rules, there is a possibility that you could forfeit your whole place in like the match system. I don't really know how, but lots of rules. So I think starting this whole like match process for externships is meant to prepare us for what's going to happen during internship, because it's a much more rigorous, much more like high stakes process for internships. So I think this is meant to like prepare us for that. For like internship, I know they do like rankings and stuff. And essentially what rankings are is you rank your top choices, you know, out of all the sites you interviewed for, you rank them from your top choice to your last choice. And I think sites do the same in terms of like students they interviewed. And like that's how the match process happens. For externships, rankings aren't a thing per se, but the students are encouraged on their own to mentally rank their sites so that when they start getting offers, they kind of know, you know, how to maneuver the options. So on match day, beginning at 9 a.m., sites can begin to send out offers for externship positions. The reason they encourage students to rank them is because you can only hold on to one offer at a time. So if you have your sites ranked mentally in your own head, you will kind of know how to maneuver offers when you get them, depending on where you want to end up. And when you get an offer from a site, you can only hold on to it for 2 hours, and you can only hold on to one offer at a time. So if you get an offer from a site and you're holding on to that offer because you're waiting to hear from another site, once you get that second offer, if it's within those 2 hours, you must accept or decline at least one of those offers. After you've held on to an offer for an hour, if you still have not heard from any other site, specifically like your top choice, only then are you allowed to reach out to another site that you are waiting on an offer for to ask them if you are still being considered for a position. If in response to that inquiry, they send you back an offer, you are required to accept that offer, even if it is not from your top choice. If it is from your top choice, good for you, congratulations. But if you asked about still being considered for another site and it's not your top choice, and in response to that email, you then get an offer, you must accept that offer and decline all the rest. If in response to your inquiry, they say, no, you're not being considered, you can still hold on to whatever offer you are holding on to and continue reaching out to whatever other sites you're still waiting to hear from. But again, if one of your inquiries results in you getting an offer from another site, you must accept the offer. If during that 2-hour block, you decide you're not going to reach out to other sites, you're just gonna wait to see if you hear from anyone, by the end of your 2-hour holding time, you must either accept or decline that offer. You cannot hold on to it for more than 2 hours. So at the end of that 2-hour clock, you better have sent an email because if you don't, you're in big trouble. And essentially why all of these rules exist is because they're trying to make sure that positions get filled as quickly and as efficiently as possible. If people are holding on to 2, 3, 4 offers at once, that is preventing sites from filling the positions with other students who could also possibly be waiting on offers. And so match day continues from 9 a.m. I believe it's until 4 p.m. that day. And if you get an offer after 4 p.m., you have until, I believe it's 9 a.m. the next day to accept or decline. Am I missing anything? I think that's it. And yeah, so the hope is that by the end of match day, everyone has matched somewhere, everyone has an externship position for the next year. If for whatever reason you don't match on match day, there's like a second round process of some sort. I don't really know what that entails, but essentially there is a second round of matches that happens, and everyone matches. At the end of the day, and this was something that like we kept getting told, like it was being told to us to help us calm our anxieties, but it didn't necessarily do that. But everyone matches. Like, it's not a huge deal if you have to go through the second round of the match process, because everyone matches. No matter what, everyone will end up with an externship position. So that's like the biggest thing to take away from this. Yes, it is a very stressful and anxiety-provoking process, but at the end of the day, everyone matches to a site. So all of that being said, really, I just wanted to give some insight into what my first externship application process was like, and also just provide some more general information for what the externship application process looks like as a whole, and also what the match process looks like as a whole. So I really hope that this video was both entertaining and helpful. I am really excited to start my externship next year. If you also went through the externship match process this year, or you've been through it in the past, leave your thoughts, your experiences down below in the comments. I feel like it's always helpful to hear from others about what their experiences were like. But yeah, I feel like I've been talking for a really long time. So with that being said, thank you for watching, especially if you made it all the way to the end. I truly appreciate it. Leave me a comment down below if you have any questions or suggestions for future videos. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and click that little notification bell so you don't miss my next upload. And I'll see you in my next one.